Hello, and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview. This is a show where we take a look at what's coming to this week's edition of the North Coast Journal. I'm your host, Tanya Schrum, and we are joined by North Coast Journal's news editor, Thad Greenson, and arts and features editor, Jennifer Fumiko Cahill. Welcome to you both. It's great to see you.
Good to
Nice
see
to
you,
see you, Tanya. Nice to be back together, the three of us here. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has. So we're having our summer of fun, and we're going to talk about what is best in our community. And Jennifer has the rundown.
I know, you forget about your political polling right now. Let's talk about the real voting issue, which is the best of our annual big fat issue full of everybody's favorite picks from around the county. I remember back when dinosaurs roamed the earth and there were like 40 or 50 categories. I think there are now 2 billion or something like that. And people actually sit down and go through and vote on all of these categories. And
As
it's
they
interesting
should.
to me. Yeah, I think to myself, like, oh, well, who cares deeply enough about all of these, every last thing? And then I go through and I'm like, oh, no, that's not right. Or like, oh, yeah, definitely that one. And I realize we all actually care about these things. And we want people to be rewarded for doing a great job, right? And this is our chance to locally kind of hype all these people. So again, this is not something that the journal editorial staff puts together. Like, we don't decide what the categories are. We find out about who won around the time that the winners get notified. And we look through, and then the things that are of interest to us, we call dibs, and we do little write-ups on them in the issue. And yes, I go through first and I stake out all the food first. And I have to tell you, something very exciting is happening around fried chicken, which, you know, I am on the fried chicken beat from forever. The best fried chicken goes to the Coop truck, which has fried chicken sandwiches, but the best fried chicken sandwich goes to Pineapple Express, who also picked up best fries. And I can vouch for the Pineapple Express chicken sandwich. It's fantastic. Crunchy, panko, saucy. If you go on the right day or you like stalk their Facebook page to see what they have, you can end up with the Korean chicken one, which is also fantastic. The fries, I am a person who is about fry moderation, not volume, but toppings. So I believe in moderate sauce application, but those of you who feel that YOLO itch in the stem of your brain, there are a million different toppings you can get on them, including a big old scoop of shredded Kahlua pig. It's pretty good. And now they have a brick and mortar store, so maybe they'll have that Korean chicken all the time. Thoughts? Also, I just want to give a shout out to Thad, who did a lovely write-up on the Redwood Curtain folks. Redwood Curtain Brewing, Best Brewery. You know, Best Brewery is tough around here.
That's a hot topic right there.
Yeah, it is. And Thad is brave and honest and confesses first learning about the Redwood Curtain Brewery mission when they were just starting to put in their facility. And he met these folks at a wedding and talked to them about their plan and then left. I believe he said that he was thinking, wow, what nice people with a terrible idea. A terrible business idea. And it turns out it was not terrible. But then again, you know, who are we? We went into journalism, fools. There are some really cool trends happening, I want to say that trees are so hot right now because the best place to have a picnic is Sequoia Park, and the best place to take a selfie is on the Redwood Skywalk, which solid. The only thing I don't like about selfies on the Redwood Skywalk is they make me look shorter, those big trees. No appreciation. So rude. The best mural this year, and mural competition is also stiff. We're just about to start the, I believe it's the 4th and final Eureka Street Art Festival, but murals are have become our thing in Humboldt. Somehow, samba, murals, steel drums, somehow it became a Humboldt thing. And the Josiah Lawson mural at Arcata High won this year's best mural, and Kelby McIntosh did a lovely write-up about that. I also, in the A&E section, I got to talk to some young people. Perhaps you have heard of the band The Critics. They have won for Best Original Band, and they recently did a music video with the winner of the Best Local Filmmaker. Let me double check. I don't want to say his name wrong because it's such a dramatic name. Griffin Locke. I'm sorry. Are you standing on a Scottish cliff right now looking at the sea, thinking about eternity? Griffin Locke is our best local filmmaker. The Critics are our best original band, and they're all like under 20. One of the band members is still in high school. So way to make me feel old, guys. But they're really great. And actually, they played our best of party a couple of years ago, I believe. And they were great. We have a lot of really cool winners and stuff, and a lot of surprise shifts. One thing that struck us and that Thad wrote about was the fact that the wedding entertainment.
Yep. And best place to hold a divorce party.
Yes, the wedding entertainment was the axe box, the mobile axe throwing thing that you see at festivals and stuff, where you throw axes at targets. But also the best place to hold a divorce party was at the Arcata Hatchet House, where you throw axes at targets.
I think that's valid.
But this is how we, as Thad pointed out, this is how we both celebrate love and celebrate the end of love.
Maybe we just really, really like axes. I mean, maybe that's the only takeaway here.
It was always my favorite thing when I go to a Ren fair. Throw them axes.
That's true. I want to know, are we going to update the anniversaries? We're not going to do paper anniversary, silver anniversary. We're just going to do different throwing implements. I think I just passed my throwing star anniversary. Also, in the relationship sector, I noticed that the best place to meet singles is Friday Night Market. I feel like that's solid, right? It's crowds, there's not pressure, it's all cool local vendors and stuff. Meanwhile, in perhaps the most heartless thing I've ever heard any of you say, the best place to break up with someone is Applebee's. My God, Humboldt, have you no mercy?
Yeah, I saw that and I just thought, wow, that's really making a statement all around, isn't it?
That is dark.
Maybe better than the Village Pantry?
I don't know. I feel like a $2 margarita that you're crying into. I don't know. It's dark. Anyway, but there's a ton of stuff in there, and congratulations to all our winners. Peruse and let us know what you think, because the only thing we love more than the best of issue is controversy over the best of issue.
And I think it's a wonderful way to learn about services that you may need coming up and who's the best of if you need your car detailed and such and such.
So true. And now you know if somebody's like, hey, do you want to go to Applebee's? It's basically like saying we need to talk.
like a public service announcement there. Be warned.
Oh, Oh no, dodge the Applebee's invitation at all costs. Well, Jennifer, thank you for highlighting all the best of Humboldt this year. And with that, we're going to have to be responsible and turn to the news. Thad, what's the story that you have for us this week?
Oh, Tanya, we have a massive update on Cal Poly Humboldt protest fallout. So this story actually, sometimes you're working on a story and then a bunch of things just kind of break loose that end up kind of on the same topic. And so you end up with a gazillion word news story as opposed to the nice, trim, focused one that you're planning on. So really, since the inception, or since the moment kind of protesters or pro-Palestine demonstrators tried to launch kind of a soft occupation of Siemens Hall on April 22nd, leading to a confrontation with police that evening that was very well documented and widely reported on, and then led to a week-long occupation of the building, the shuttering of campus, moving all classes online, ultimately having commencement ceremonies off campus. And on April 30th, a massive police force of hundreds of officers from all over Northern California kind of moving in to clear the campus and arresting 32 protesters. We've really wanted to kind of zoom in on kind of the first hours of the protest and see kind of how it was handled. And there's been this question and kind of these competing narratives about whether police action and the administration's response to the initial protest to some extent kind of radicalized protesters and escalated the situation. And so we, months ago submitted some Public Records Act requests trying to kind of get at the answers to that question. And so we were looking for two things. First, we wanted to see we wanted recordings of 911 calls from Siemens Hall that afternoon. There had been this characterization that staff members, employees working in their offices there, had been concerned for their safety and had actively called the police. And so that was one of the things that administration had said is, look, like administrators didn't call the police. This was employees who were worried that called the police on these protesters. So we requested, recordings or transcripts of those calls. And then we requested body camera footage from the UPD officers who responded to those calls. Again, wanting to really see, from the officers' perspectives, like what's the situation they first encountered when they came into Siemens Hall. It's a bit convoluted and I try not to get too lost in the weeds, but the university basically said they didn't have any records responsive to our request after 2 months of processing our request. And the reason for that is they said that there were, in fact, no 911 calls placed to UPD that day. Which seems noteworthy. If I'm afraid for my safety, that's the first thing I think about doing is calling 911, right? But what they did have is calls to the business line at UPD. And there was 6 total calls. And so they said, quote unquote, in the interest of transparency, they would give those to us. So we got those. Interestingly, they did not then volunteer the body camera footage that we requested associated with the 911 calls. They said they didn't have anything responsive to our request on that because we had requested, UPD's response to 911 calls. The 911 calls didn't exist, so they say there was no records responsive. So we're asking for those again, and hopefully at some point we'll get the body-worn camera footage that they could have given us months ago, theoretically. Anyway, interestingly, these 911 or police calls for service from employees in Siemens Hall really don't jive with what administrators have been saying about kind of the outset of the protest, or that employees felt unsafe. There's these 6 calls. 4 of them are between a aide to the president, so somebody who works in the president's office, and a dispatcher, and the other 2 are unidentified other employees in Siemens Hall. None of them express concern for their safety. None of them report vandalism. None of them, report any unruly behavior other than folks protesting and being disruptive, and a couple mention protesters setting up tents. I thought was most interesting is, kind of all these folks are saying UPD might want to send somebody up here, want to make sure you guys are aware that this is happening. The first mention, or the only mention in these calls of removing protesters from the building comes from the presidential aide, who says that she is calling at the direction of Chief of Staff Mark Johnson because he went out of his office and there were two protesters sitting out front, and he asked them to identify themselves, and they refused. And so he then relayed to her to call UPD to have these two protesters removed from the building. So that's far different. You know, Mark Johnson told me personally when I interviewed him a couple months ago that he personally witnessed barricades going up at the doors of Siemens Hall before police arrived on campus. And he told me that he witnessed vandalism of Siemens Hall before police arrived on campus. Again, no reference in these calls to vandalism or barricaded doors. So that's, you know, the first thing our story focuses on. In the course of researching that story, I also came across footage that I had not previously seen, but from freelance journalist Ryan Hudson, who has actually worked with the Journal on occasion and works most prominently with the Red-Headed Black Belt. And I think most folks, whether they know it or not, are familiar with Ryan's work. She captured the video of the scrum at the front door of Siemens Hall, which included, you know, basically the violent clash between protesters and officers, where a number of officers were injured, some protesters were injured. There were baton blows. There was an officer bunked over the head with a plastic water jug in a scene that went viral. And it was a very, you know, scary, tense situation where officers were trying to force their way into Siemens Hall. Protesters were ultimately successful in kind of warding them off, and the officers decided to stand down, and the occupation began. So anyway, I had seen that video. I'd seen a bunch of video Ryan had taken in the aftermath of that incident, which happened about 7 p.m. on April 22nd. But what I hadn't seen is Ryan was actually in the building, you know, about an hour before that, and walked around filming and talking to protesters. And that video, interestingly, it's about 12 minutes, can be found on her YouTube page, which is Humboldt Freelance Reporting on YouTube. And that video is illuminating because it does not show any vandalism in the building. And again, this is after police had been there, after police had cleared everybody but the protesters from the building. And Ryan walks entirely through Siemens Hall, both floors. And again, no vandalism, no barricades on the doors at that point, and really nothing that seems terribly unruly. You got some protesters chanting, banging makeshift drums and stuff like that, but there's no widespread lawlessness or destruction or anything like that. So I thought, you know, again, I was working on both these things as, you know, really, I think shedding some light onto the validity of this narrative that administration has pushed repeatedly, that the police response was directly in response to vandalism and destruction of the building. It does not appear that that was the case. It appears it was attempting to clear a building of an inconvenient protest and a disruptive protest, but not something that was destroying university property.
I do want to say that I remember that Mark Johnson interview, and, you know, he seemed very committed to the narrative that people came to be violent, or that they were ready to be violent. And I have to say that I had a little chuckle reading the description of, you know, the video and of, you know, things that Ryan saw an hour before the police, and, you know, including someone had an accordion with them.
Right.
Which, okay, that is maybe an act of violence in some circles, but it was very, you know, her description of events up against, and the report's description of events up against Thad's previous reporting coming from, you know, Mark Johnson's The Horse's Mouth. I see a real stark contrast there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree, and I'll just extend on that, and that, you know, in that interview with Mark Johnson, I was not there to talk to him about this concept of whether the police response, you know, radicalized protesters or escalated the situation. And he volunteered that topic. He brought it to the table. He said he wanted to combat false narratives. And the first one he addressed was, you know, this idea that the administration response was either a crackdown on, you know, First Amendment protected activities, a peaceful protest, or that, you know, the police response somehow escalated the situation and led to kind of the violent confrontation and some of the vandalism in the property. You know, I'll also say that Tom Jackson Jr., the president, has not spoken to us, but he gave an interview to the Times Standard during the occupation, in which he described the protesters as criminals who did not come with good intentions. So, I mean, this is very much the university, I feel like, has painted the picture that protesters came bent on destruction. And, you know, I thought it was Ryan Hudson had some very interesting comments and reflections in talking to her, where she was saying, you know, what she saw in the hour leading up to that confrontation at the door was protesters who absolutely seemed intent on staying the night. They brought sleeping bags, they brought tents, they brought board games, they brought entertainment, they brought snacks. But she said she did not see anything to indicate there was anything, you know, they had anything other than the works other than, you know, civil disobedience, a sleepover intended to bring attention to, you know, to the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. So anyway, I was working on all that whole story, and then two others kind of broke loose at the same time. So the one was that Stacey Eads, the district attorney of Humboldt County, announced that she has declined to press charges against 27 of the 39 individuals arrested in conjunction with the protests. The number that she has is we're unclear exactly where that came from. There were 32 people arrested in the final sweep of campus, and there were 3 people arrested on the opening night of the protest on April 22nd. So that's 35. We don't exactly know the circumstances under which the other 4 were arrested. And she has declined to kind of identify which cases she has declined to charge and stuff like that. But basically, she said that there was insufficient evidence, or it was in the interest of justice not to proceed with filing those cases. So those are 27 people who are arrested who will not, who will not be criminally charged and go through proceedings in relation to whatever conduct was alleged in those situations. And then the other 12 cases, she says she has sent back to the University Police Department, basically asking for additional investigation to be done. So she felt those 12 may get to a point where she feels like the charges are appropriate, but there wasn't enough evidence and the investigation wasn't thorough enough for her to make that decision right now.
See, that's wonderful news. I was really happy to read that.
Yeah, she for these cases have been sitting on her desk for more than a month, and we've been checking back in with her regularly, and she has kind of repeatedly said that her office is conducting a really thorough review and taking a close look at at the facts from the investigation in order to make its decision. So then, amid all this, also the Eureka Police Department, the city of Eureka has a police oversight function that has a civilian oversight board that is tasked with kind of making policy recommendations and overseeing the police department. But then it has also hired this independent police auditor, which is this firm out of, I believe, the Santa Rosa area, but I'm not positive about that. But an out-of-area firm that specializes in auditing police departments. And so they act as a check and balance and review of all internal affairs investigation and complaints of misconduct with the police department. And so this system has been in place for, I think, about a year and a half. And as a part of that, 2 city council members asked OIR Group, this independent auditor, to look at Eureka police officers' involvement in the initial April 22nd response to the protest. And so what happened is UPD kind of sensed that the situation, it got orders from according to the report, it got orders from the university administration to clear Siemens Hall on the evening of April 22nd and clear all these protesters out. There was about 30 based on the best estimates at the time. UPD decided it didn't have the personnel to do that, and so it sent out a mutual aid request to other local law enforcement agencies. And Eureka Police was one of several that sent officers to help. They sent 4 officers and a sergeant. And they actually ended up on kind of the front lines of that scrum at the entrance of Siemens Hall that was captured on that viral video. And so these council members wanted OIR Group to look closely at EPD's involvement, and specifically to look closely at the individual officer's use of force in that situation to determine whether it was within policy and whether it was justified. And so OIR Group did a really thorough review. It's like a 29-page report that folks can find on the city's website. And what it found basically is that the officers in the auditor's determination did use appropriate force and were justified in using baton strikes and fist strikes and things like that, but that they were put in an untenable situation, and that incident command, which was UPD, made basically some poor decisions and lacked kind of a firm control of the incident, which means didn't have contingency plans in place, didn't stop to do a risk assessment of kind of what are we really trying to accomplish here? What are the potential risks of forcing entry into this building and trying to clear it of protesters versus the potential rewards? The report finds that there was no imminent threat to safety or, maybe a minimal threat to property, but there was no kind of exigent circumstances that warranted trying to do a police action like this. So that's the very short of it, but it's a really meaty report and there's a ton there.
All right. Well, thank you, Thad, and I will continue to look for more information as it becomes available. Thank you both. It's been wonderful to have you back with me, and that wraps up our time for this week. The current edition of the North Coast Journal is available on newsstands now, or of course you can find it online at northcoastjournal.com. I am Tanya Schrum. Thanks for being with us, staying informed, and find out where your favorite piercing place is for your next labre. Have a great week.